I never imagined I'd be unwelcome at my own son's wedding, but there I was dressed, prepared, proud, and then, humiliated. She looked me in the eye with a cold little smile and said the words I'll never forget. "You should leave." I had sacrificed everything for that day, funded the entire ceremony, poured my love into every detail, and yet I was treated like an outsider. So I walked out, and then I did something no one saw coming. I canceled every single wedding payment, and what happened next changed everything. Asterisk, I always imagined that when my only son got married, I would be there beside him, helping him pick out flowers, smiling at the rehearsal, hugging him before he said I do. I dreamed of the moment when I would fix his tie and tell him how proud I was. I thought I'd be the first person he called when he found the right girl, the woman who would become my daughter-in-law. I envisioned myself helping plan the wedding, choosing the decorations, crying tears of joy at the sight of him waiting at the altar. That's what I thought motherhood led to, a culmination, a full circle. But his reality left me, broken in a way I never thought possible. I found out about my son's wedding the same way strangers find out about celebrity engagements through Facebook. There was a big, glossy engagement photo with an overly edited caption that said, "Can't wait to spend forever with my best friend. #4verstartsnow." My heart sank into my stomach. There had been no phone call, no invitation, no excited knock at my door to tell me the news, just a picture that told the world he was moving on to a new chapter without me. I stared at that post for what felt like hours. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the comments. Hundreds of congratulations from friends and extended family, many of whom I had introduced to my son when he was just a child. They all seemed to know. Everyone seemed to be in on this magical new beginning, except for the one woman who gave him life. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe they hadn't sent invitations yet. Maybe they were planning to call me after the announcement. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe. I clung to excuses like a drowning person grabs at driftwood. That's what mothers do. We find ways to give our children the benefit of the doubt, even when they've broken our hearts. 2 weeks passed and still nothing. No text, no call. I finally broke down and sent him a message. It read, "Saw the news on Facebook. Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you. Let me know how I can help." He replied 2 days later. 2 days, just a dry, one-sentence response. "Thanks, Mom. We've got it covered, but I'll let you know." That's it. No warmth, no invitation to be part of the process, no mention of me flying in, meeting her parents, or even sitting down to talk about the big day. I reread that message so many times, hoping I had misinterpreted it, but the meaning was clear. I wasn't needed. I cried that night, not because I wasn't invited to some party or because I wanted to be the center of attention. I cried because I realized my role in his life had somehow become optional. After years of staying up during his fevers, attending every school event, working double shifts just to afford his football gear, and sacrificing my own dreams to raise him right, I was now just a footnote. I had always believed we were close. We used to talk every Sunday. He used to call me Mama Bear and send me funny memes. I was there through every heartbreak, every disappointment, every accomplishment. And now, when he was about to embark on one of the biggest journeys of his life, I was excluded. Still, I didn't let the rejection win. I told myself, this is just a phase. Maybe the bride is shy. Maybe her family is taking over the planning. So, instead of waiting for an invitation that never came, I did something most would call foolish. I offered to help. I sent a message saying I'd love to contribute financially. I asked if they needed help with the venue or the dress or catering. I told them I wanted the day to be perfect. That was the only message that got a fast response. Suddenly, I received a polite but unusually cheerful message from the bride herself. She thanked me for being so kind and generous. She even attached a PDF with a list of vendors and payment deadlines. No greeting, no hi. "I'm so glad to finally talk to you." Just a list of financial obligations. And like a fool, I paid them, every single one, because I thought, maybe if I do this, they'll include me. Maybe they'll see how much I care and remember that I'm family too. But as the days turned into weeks and the payments kept going out, I still wasn't invited to anything. No updates, no pictures, no fittings. I wasn't asked for input. I was just the invisible credit card behind the scenes. I remember standing in my kitchen one morning, reading an email from the wedding planner asking for final confirmation on a floral arrangement that I hadn't even seen. I realized then I was financing a dream that I wasn't even allowed to witness. It was like buying a house for someone and then being told you couldn't walk through the front door, that you were too much, too old-fashioned, too emotional, or just too inconvenient. But I kept quiet because I told myself that showing up for my son was more important than showing up for my ego. I still had hope. I still believed, deep down, that maybe on the day of the wedding, he'd surprise me, that maybe he'd say, I know I didn't do this right, Mom, but I'm glad you're here. I had no idea that the real surprise would be far more painful. Asterisk after sending that final payment for the flowers, I sat at my dining table and stared at the spreadsheet I had created just to keep track of everything I'd paid for. I had spent over $14,000 by that point. The venue deposit, the catering service, the lighting crew, the custom floral wall the bride wanted for her Instagram photos, all of it was coming from my account. And yet, I hadn't been consulted about a single detail. Not once. It was strange. Really, I wasn't a guest. I wasn't a planner. I wasn't even acknowledged. But I was the financial backbone of the entire wedding. I had paid for the dream, but somehow I was the only one left out of it. And still, I kept going. Because that's what mothers do when their hearts are involved. They keep giving, hoping that love will be returned. I remember calling the bakery to confirm the cake payment. The woman on the phone was sweet. She said, "Oh, you must be the mother of the bride." I laughed politely and said, "No, I'm the groom's mother." There was a long pause. Then she replied, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just assumed." That moment told me everything. I wasn't just left out, I wasn't even mentioned. I had no idea what the theme of the wedding was. I didn't know the color palette. I didn't even know what day it was actually happening until I saw a public post about the RSVP deadline. My own son hadn't told me. He didn't call, didn't check in, didn't ask for my opinion on anything. And yet, I was the one who had made all this possible. It's funny how money works in families. You give it, not just for the material need, but as a gesture of love, of support, of belief. I thought I was helping build a future for my son. I thought I was easing the stress for him and his bride so they could focus on what really mattered, their love. But the truth, I was just an ATM. They wanted my silence, my absence, and my money, and I gave it. I gave it freely, not because I was desperate to be needed, but because I couldn't bear the idea of my son walking into his new life without knowing I had his back. I wanted his first steps into marriage to be firm, secure, supported. I wanted his bride to feel like she was marrying into love, into warmth, into a family that would embrace her. I thought if I gave generously, it would soften their hearts. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd turn to me and say, "Thank you, we see you, we love you." But those words never came, not even a thank you card. Every update I received came indirectly through other relatives, social media, or vendors who assumed I was someone close, but in reality, I was just the name on the invoice. I was the email address listed for billing, never for approval, never for planning, and yet I kept justifying their behavior. Maybe they were just overwhelmed. Maybe the bride's family was traditional and wanted to control everything. Maybe my son was being pulled in too many directions. I told myself these things late at night, when the silence in my house felt too loud, when my heart ached from being pushed away by the very child I had raised with so much love. You know, I once found an old drawing in my closet from when my son was in kindergarten. It was a stick figure family, me, him, and our dog. He had written my mom as my best friend in crooked little letters at the top. I sat on the floor and cried when I found it. That little boy, the one who used to run to me when he was scared, when he was proud, when he just wanted a hug. Where had he gone? How had we drifted so far? I had supported him through every chapter. I was there when he got rejected from his dream college. I was there when he totaled his first car, and I didn't scream, I just held him and said I was glad he was okay. I was there when his first girlfriend broke his heart. I was the one who stayed up with him, made him tea, told him he'd love again. But now I was just a faceless helper, a donor. The final blow came when I sent one last message to ask if there was anything else they needed. I offered to pay for a makeup artist, maybe even a spa package for the bride, something small, something thoughtful. The reply came from the bride, "Thanks, but we've got that handled. You've done enough. You've done enough." I sat with those words for a long time. Not thank you for everything. Now we couldn't have done this without you. Just, you've done enough. It sounded less like appreciation and more like dismissal. Like I was a contractor whose work was no longer required. Like I was being told to pack up my emotional tools and go. And still, part of me waited for the moment they'd redeem it all. Maybe they were planning a surprise for me. Maybe I'd walk into the wedding and find a seat reserved with my name on it, a flower pinned to my chest, a grateful smile from my son at the altar. But that moment never came, because what I didn't know yet was that they didn't even want me there. Asterisk, the rehearsal dinner was held at a fancy little restaurant tucked inside a boutique hotel, one of those places where the lights are dim, the wine flows endlessly, and the laughter is a little depolished. I wasn't formally invited. No one had sent me an email or a phone call, but I had paid for it. The payment invoice had come to me a week prior, and I had quietly transferred the money, hoping that doing so would mean I was welcome, or at the very least, tolerated. I arrived wearing a soft blue dress, nothing extravagant, just enough to show I'd made an effort. I remember checking my reflection in the restroom mirror before walking in. I smoothed my hair, reapplied some lipstick, took a deep breath, and whispered, "This is your son's big moment. Be proud, be gracious, be strong." But the moment I stepped into that room, I knew I didn't belong. No one rushed up to greet me. No one called out my name. I stood there for a full 30 seconds, completely unnoticed, while the bride's family mingled and laughed like they were part of some exclusive club. Her mother was dressed in pearls, sipping wine, talking to a group of distant relatives. The groom's friends, all young, loud, full of confidence, barely looked up. And then I saw her, the bride. She was standing near the fireplace, holding a champagne flute and smiling for a photo. She saw me. Our eyes met, but instead of warmth, there was something else, something sharp, cold, measured. She gave me a tight, forced smile, the kind of smile you give to a stranger at the grocery store who's standing too close. I walked toward her anyway, because that's what you do. You keep trying. I complimented her dress. I said she looked beautiful. She thanked me, but her tone was flat, almost bored, like she was talking to a hotel concierge instead of her future mother-in-law. Then she excused herself and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there, holding my purse, unsure of what to do next. So I found a quiet corner and tried to blend in. I watched my son laugh at something his best man said. He hadn't noticed me yet. 10 minutes passed, 15. Finally, he looked over and saw me. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, maybe even guilt, but it vanished quickly. He walked over, gave me a side hug, and said, "Hey, Mom, you made it, like I had crashed the event." I smiled and said, "Of course, I wouldn't miss it." But even then, something in his eyes was distant, guarded, as if he wasn't sure how to fit me into this world. He was building. We barely had time to talk before someone called him over for photos. He left, promising to catch up with me later. I nodded, pretending it was fine, pretending I wasn't slowly unraveling inside. I took my seat at the far end of the room, away from the couple, away from the family tables. No one asked me to move. Closer, dinner was served. I ate in silence, watching as the bride toasted her parents, thanking them for making her dream wedding come true. She didn't mention me not once, not a word about the woman who had paid for the very chairs they were sitting on, the meals they were enjoying, the lights that made the room glow. And then came the moment that truly broke something inside me. After dinner, someone announced that close family members could come forward and share a few words of toast, a story, something meaningful. I saw other parents stepping up. The bride's father told a long, winding story about her childhood. Her mother cried, holding her hand. A cousin cracked a few jokes. Everyone clapped. Everyone cheered. I looked at my son. He didn't look back, so I stood up. My heart was pounding. My palms were sweating. But I told myself this was my chance to say something simple, something loving. Maybe this would be the moment they'd finally see me. I walked slowly toward the front, but before I could even reach the mic, the bride stepped in front of me. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cause a scene. She just leaned in slightly, smiled that same rehearsed smile, and whispered, "This isn't the time for emotional moments. We want to keep it light, you know? Maybe you can say something at the brunch tomorrow." Brunch tomorrow? There was a brunch, another event I hadn't been invited to. I nodded like a fool and walked back to my seat. But inside, something shattered. It wasn't just about the toast. It was about the message. You don't belong here. You're not part of this memory. I sat there, humiliated, trying to hold back tears while the laughter resumed and another groomsman took the mic. My food turned to ash in my mouth. My dress suddenly felt too tight. My chest ached, not physically, but in that way only a mother's heart can break, slowly, painfully, in silence. When the dinner ended and people started taking photos, no one asked me to join. I stood at the edge, smiling awkwardly in the background of one group shot, like an uninvited guest. Not one framed photo that night included me, not one hug, not one thank you. And as I walked out of that restaurant, heels clicking softly against the pavement, I realized something gut-wrenching. They didn't forget to include me. They chose not to. And no matter how much love I had given, no matter how much money I had spent, no matter how deeply I cared, in their perfect little world, I was just an outsider with a credit card. Asterisk the night before the wedding, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at my reflection in the dim vanity mirror. My eyes were puffy from crying the night before, but I did my best to look presentable. I had brought the dress weeks ago, a soft gold gown, elegant but modest. I chose it carefully, hoping it wouldn't outshine the bride, hoping it would say, "I'm proud, I'm present, but I know this isn't my day." That's what I kept reminding myself. I pinned my hair back, slipped on my earrings, and whispered, "You've got this. You're his mother." That still means something, and yet, even as I stood at the edge of their celebration, I felt like a misplaced page in a book already written without me. The laughter, the tight circles of conversation, the whispered plans and glances, I was outside all of it. Still, I kept trying. The morning of the wedding, I went to the venue early, hoping to help with anything last-minute arrangements, running errands, even holding someone's purse. I just wanted to be useful. Maybe if I could just contribute one small thing, they'd let me feel like I was part of this day. I walked into the bridal suite quietly. There were curling irons, makeup brushes, and perfume bottles scattered across every surface. The bride and her bridesmaids were laughing, music playing softly. Her mother saw me firsthand instantly. I felt the tension, a flicker of something in her eyes, annoyance, discomfort. I couldn't tell. I smiled politely and said, "Good morning. I just wanted to see if anyone needed anything." I brought mints and a sewing kit in case. The bride turned, mascara wand in hand, and interrupted with a laugh. "We're good, really. Everything's under control." That was it. No thank you. No come sit with us. Just a casual dismissal, like I was a hotel employee offering room service at the wrong time. Still, I stayed near the doorway, quietly observing, telling myself I'd leave in a moment. Then, something happened. One of the bridesmaids realized her bracelet was broken. She started to panic, saying it was part of a matching set and that it would ruin the photos. I stepped forward, gently offering, "I have a small clasp in my bag that might fix it. I'd be happy to." The bride's voice cut through the moment like ice. She didn't shout. She didn't scold. But what she said chilled me to the bone. "Can we not make this about you right now?" The room fell silent. Even the playlist on someone's phone seemed to fade into nothing. Her tone wasn't angry, it was worse. It was casual, offhand, like she was stating a fact, like I was a child who kept interrupting adult conversations. I blinked, slowly, carefully, because I knew if I let my eyes water, I'd cry, and I couldn't afford to cry again. Not here, not now. I stepped back and whispered. I wasn't trying to make it about me. She shrugged. "It's just, you kind of show up and want to be involved in everything. This is our day, her day, our, not mine, never mine." And still, not one person in that room stood up for me. Not one bridesmaid said, "She's just trying to help." Not even my son's name was spoken. It was like I was some awkward aunt who didn't know her place, someone they had to tolerate just for one more day. I turned and left the room slowly, making sure my footsteps didn't sound rushed. I didn't want them to know how hard I was holding back tears. I didn't want them to see how small they had made me feel. Back in the hallway, I leaned against the cold wall and stared at the ceiling. I thought of all the times I had stayed up helping my son with homework, all the nights I'd paced the floor when he had a fever, all the mornings I made sure he left with breakfast in his bag, love in his heart, and pride in his name. And now, I was being told I was making it about me because I had tried to help fix a bracelet. I went outside for air, my heels clicking on the concrete like little reminders that I still had a place in this world, even if they didn't want me in theirs. The wedding coordinator saw me and asked if I was okay. I smiled and nodded, because what else do you say when you've just been made to feel invisible by your own family? Just stepping out for a moment, I whispered. I sat on a bench near the garden, away from the whispers, away from the noise. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't about one comment. It wasn't about a bracelet or a room full of strangers. It was about years of being slowly pushed to the edge of my son's life. Years of slowly being replaced by new priorities, new people, and eventually a woman who didn't even want me there. And my son, he never called, never came looking, not even after I left that hallway. I could have screamed. I could have walked into that room and demanded respect. I could have reminded them who paid for those dresses, for the food, for the music they'd be dancing to in just a few hours. But I didn't, because love, real love, doesn't scream to be noticed. It doesn't beg. Real love leaves, and something inside me began to harden, not out of bitterness, but out of preservation. I couldn't keep giving to people who only saw me as a burden. I couldn't keep justifying cruelty in the name of it's their day. I had given enough, and somehow, I already knew what was coming next. This wedding, this day I thought I was part of, would end up breaking what little was left of us. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 4. I arrived an hour early, hoping to find my seat before the crowd poured in, before the whispers started again, before the stares could sting me. The venue was stunning, an outdoor garden lined with white chairs and roses that matched the bride's bouquet. I had paid for every single one of them. I took a slow breath, smoothing down my dress, holding my clutch a little tighter than necessary. I told myself again, you're just here to support your son. Nothing else matters. But something inside me was trembling. I could feel it like a glass of water placed close to the edge. I had hoped the ceremony would offer some healing, that in the vows, the tears, the shared promises, I would feel a spark of belonging again. A nod from my son, a smile across the crowd, something died instead. I got a dagger as I stood near the back of the aisle. Scanning for my name card, the bride's sister approached me. She looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her dress, avoiding my eyes. "Hi," she said quietly. "Can I talk to you for a second?" She motioned for me to follow her, and I did, heart racing, panic rising. We walked toward a shaded corner behind the altar where the bride stood, arms folded, veil already draped over her hair like a crown. She didn't say hello. She didn't even fake a smile this time. Her expression was cold. I could feel the tension. Before she spoke, then, in the most casual, unshaken tone I've ever heard, she said, "We think it's best if you don't stay." At first, I didn't understand. I blinked, trying to process her words. My ears rang. I felt lightheaded. "Excuse me," I asked, barely above a whisper. She repeated it, slower this time, as if explaining to someone dense, "We'd prefer if you left. There's just a lot of energy around today, and we really want things to go smoothly. You've been a little tense, and we want good vibes only, good vibes only." Like I was a bad smell in a perfect room. I stared at her, stunned, waiting, hoping for my son to appear, to step in, to say, "Mom, don't be ridiculous. Of course you're staying." But he didn't come. He wasn't even there. I looked around, still half believing it was a prank, or a test, or maybe a misunderstanding. But the message was clear. I was not wanted. I had imagined many painful moments in life: my parents dying, losing friends, being alone on holidays, but never this. Never being turned away from my own child's wedding, a wedding I had funded, a celebration I had dreamed of witnessing, a moment I had earned through years of sacrifice and unconditional love. I took a step back, trying to find the words, but my voice caught in my throat. "I paid for this wedding," I finally said, quietly, every detail. "I paid for all of it." The bride raised her eyebrows like that didn't matter, like money wasn't part of love, like effort meant nothing. "We appreciate that," she said, "and it's not personal. But today needs to be drama-free for everyone's sake." Drama-free. Apparently, my presence was drama now. I looked at her one last time and asked, "Does he know you're asking me to leave?" She didn't answer right away. That told me everything. "He knows it's what's best." She finally said, "He knows." That was the final blow. He knew, and he let it happen. In that moment, I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a problem to be managed, a complication, an eyesore in their fairy tale. I felt discarded, worthless, like I had been erased from the story they were writing. Like I was the ink blot in the corner of an otherwise perfect page. I turned and walked away, not because I agreed, not because I was ashamed, but because I had no strength left to fight for someone who wouldn't fight for me. As I walked past the rows of white chairs, I felt everyone's eyes on me. I don't know if they knew what had happened. Maybe they thought I was going to the bathroom. Maybe they assumed I was too emotional to stay. But none of them stopped me. None of them asked, "Where are you going?" And my son, he never followed me, not even once. I reached my car, sat in the driver's seat, and just broke down. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. My breath came in shallow sobs. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I was supposed to be sitting in the front row. I was supposed to hear the vows, witness the rings, cry when they kissed. I was supposed to be proud. Instead, I was exiled. And the worst part, I had funded my own humiliation. Every dollar I spent led to that moment. I had paid for my own seat to be removed. I had bought the napkins and candles and tablecloths that now sat in a celebration I wasn't welcome to see. I sat there for over an hour, frozen, unable to start the car. And then, somewhere in that quiet agony, something inside me shifted. The grief hardened. The tears stopped. My hands steadied. If they didn't want me there, if my own son didn't stop her from telling me to leave, then maybe it was time I stopped showing up for people who didn't value me. Maybe I had to walk away completely, not just from the venue, but from the role I had always played. The giver, the fixer, the quiet supporter in the background. That night, when I got back to my hotel, I opened my laptop and I began canceling payments. One by one. Asterisk, there's something haunting about walking away from something you helped build. Even more haunting when no one notices you're leaving. No whispered concerns. No calls after you disappear. Just silence. Empty, cutting silence. That's how I left my son's wedding, without a scene, without a word. Just a quiet, heartbroken exit that no one even tried to stop. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the parking lot. As I sat behind the wheel of my car, the wedding ceremony had likely begun by now. Guests would be finding their seats. The music would be playing, and someone would be walking down the aisle in the dress I paid for. But I wasn't there. I wasn't even thought of. I was just a name on a list of contributors and invisible donor to a celebration that wanted my money, but not my presence. The keys trembled in my hands. I tried to start the car, but my fingers wouldn't cooperate. My heart was racing, my eyes still swollen from tears I had tried so hard to hide. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, my makeup smeared, my expression hollow. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She looked defeated, like someone who had finally given too much thought, and for the first time, I realized something very painful. I wasn't just grieving the wedding, I was grieving the end of my relationship with my son. There had been a slow unraveling over the years, but I had ignored it, made excuses, told myself he was busy, growing up, starting his own life. But now I saw the truth: he had outgrown me, or maybe worse, he had erased me piece by piece until I was no longer part of his world, and I had let it happen. I finally managed to turn the key in the ignition. The car rumbled to life, but I didn't move. I sat there, staring blankly ahead as memories flooded my mind. Him, age 5, running into my arms after his first day of school. Him, age 12, crying on my shoulder after losing his first pet. Him, age 17, laughing in the passenger seat as we drove to campus tours. Every moment we had shared felt like a cruel trick, now like they belonged to another life, another mother, another son. I pulled out of the parking lot slowly. No one saw me leave. No one ran after me. I have expected a phone call, a text, some sign of hesitation. Nothing came. The silence followed me like a second shadow, cold, heavy, final dot as I drove through. Winding streets and empty intersections, a thought began to form. It started as a whisper, then grew louder with each mile. Why did I pay for this? Not just in money, but in dignity, in self-respect, in emotional energy. Why had I poured so much into something that treated me like a liability? When I arrived back at the hotel, the walls felt smaller than before, the bed too big, the silence deafening. I sat down at the edge of the mattress and took off my heels, each step a small act of letting go. I opened my purse, pulled out my phone, and saw nothing. No missed calls, no messages. My son didn't even check to see if I had made it home. It was then that I opened my laptop. I clicked through the folders where I had saved all the wedding-related receipts, every invoice, every confirmation email, every vendor contact. My hand hovered over the mouse for a moment, trembling, and then, with a single click, I opened the email to the wedding planner. I wrote calmly, without anger, just pure clarity. Please be advised I will no longer be responsible for the final payments on the services I previously agreed to cover. I was asked to leave the wedding, and I see no reason to continue supporting an event I was not welcome to attend. Kindly notify the vendors accordingly. Send. The next email was to the florist, then the DJ, the photographer, the catering company. One after another, I contacted each service I had helped arrange and funded. I didn't need revenge. I didn't want chaos. I just wanted to take back my value, my self-worth, my dignity. I wasn't angry. I was awake. The silent exit wasn't just about leaving the venue. It was about leaving the role I had been trapped in for years, the self-sacrificing, ever-giving mother who never asked for anything in return, the one who paid, who stayed quiet, who swallowed every insult with a smile. That version of me was gone. I lay in bed that night and stared at the ceiling, feeling lighter than I had in months, maybe years. The pain was still there, don't get me wrong, but under it, there was something else blooming: peace. I had done what I could. I had loved my son with every ounce of my being. But love, real love, does not mean accepting disrespect. It does not mean begging to be seen. My silent exit may not have been loud or dramatic, but it was powerful, and I knew it was just the beginning. Asterisk, by morning, the ache in my chest had dulled, but it hadn't vanished. It had settled somewhere deeper, somewhere quieter. The kind of ache you don't cry out loud over anymore, the kind that just lives inside you. I stared out the window of the hotel room at the blue sky, cloudless and calm, mocking the storm I was carrying within. Somewhere out there, my son was waking up next to his new bride, smiling, starting his new life. Maybe they were looking at photos from the ceremony. Maybe they were laughing about the dinner, the dance, the guests. Maybe they weren't thinking about me at all, and that's what finally did it. It wasn't the cold shoulder, not the humiliation, not even the fact that I had been told to leave. No, it was the realization that after everything I'd done, I was nothing more than a forgotten footnote. So I stood up, picked up my phone, and dialed the first number. The wedding planner. Her name was Lauren, sweet, chirpy, always polite, especially when she needed payments processed. She answered after to rings, sounding tired but cheerful. Good morning, this is Lauren. How can I help you? I didn't return the pleasantries. I didn't ask about the ceremony. I went straight to the point. Hi, Lauren. This is Christine. I was responsible for covering the remaining payments for the event. That arrangement is now void. There was a pause, dead air, and then she responded slowly. I'm sorry. Can you clarify what you mean by void? I took a breath. My voice didn't shake this time. It was calm, firm. I had spent enough nights crying. This morning, I was reclaiming my strength. I will not be paying another cent for an event I was excluded from. I was asked to leave by the bride. I was not treated as family. I was not even treated as a guest. Please inform the vendors that they should seek payment elsewhere. I could hear her typing in the background. Her voice softened, almost nervously. Christine, I understand this must be very upsetting, but the contracts, I cut her off gently, but firmly. No contract was signed by me. I offered financial support out of goodwill. That goodwill ended the moment I was told to get out of my son's wedding. The line went quiet. She knew she couldn't argue. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at my screen for a moment. The silence felt different now, not heavy like it had the day before. It felt free, but I wasn't done. Next, I opened my banking app. I scanned through the last 3 months of transactions, payment after payment to vendors, rental services, makeup artists, caterers. Thousands of dollars I had given, not loaned, given. And now, I wanted them back. Not all of them, some were non-refundable. I knew that, but the final payments, the ones scheduled to go through today, the day after the wedding, those weren't going to happen. Not if I could help it. I called the bank. Hello, I'd like to place a stop payment request on multiple pending charges from the following vendors. The representative asked for my reasons. I explained with a calm clarity I hadn't had in weeks. I was financially supporting a family wedding. I was emotionally and publicly excluded from the event. I no longer authorize these payments. They are voluntary, not contracted. She was sympathetic. I'm so sorry, ma'am. That sounds horrible. I'll help you block the transactions immediately. As I confirmed each amount and vendor, a strange sense of peace washed over me. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just relief. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was protecting myself. And for the first time in this whole experience, I realized I deserved to protect myself. I wasn't just someone's mother. I was a woman who had poured decades of love, care, and sacrifice into raising a child. I had earned respect. I had earned kindness. And if those things were no longer being offered, then I had every right to remove my contributions. By the time I hung up the phone, 3 pending payments had been canceled, and 2 chargebacks were filed for deposits sent in bad faith. I didn't feel petty. I didn't feel dramatic. I felt awake. Later that afternoon, I got a text. Not from my son, not even from the bride. It was from Lauren, the planner. Hi, Christine. I've informed the parties involved. I just wanted to say I've done many weddings. But what happened to you? It didn't sit right with me. You handled it with grace. I hope you're okay. It was small, but it mattered. It was the first real acknowledgement I'd received through this entire process. The first time someone saw me, really saw me. Not as a wallet, not as a burden, But as a human being, still no call came from my son. That hurt. That will always hurt. But the pain didn't have power over me anymore. Not like it did, because I realized something. I had always been showing up for everyone else. Now, it was time to show up for myself. I packed my things, checked out of the hotel, and walked out of the lobby without looking back. The bellboy asked if I had enjoyed my stay. I smiled and said, "Not really, but I learned a lot," and that was the truth. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the people you give everything to will still choose to make you feel like nothing. But I had also learned that I still had a voice, and even if it shook, even if it came a little too late, it still mattered. I had called the planner, I had called the bank, but most importantly, I had called myself back home, back to dignity, back to boundaries, back to peace. Then the calls started coming in. It started with a buzz. My phone vibrated against the glass table as I sat in the quiet of my living room. The lights were off, the curtains drawn. The silence felt like a companion now, not an enemy. After everything that happened, peace was not just welcome, it was necessary. The first call came from an unknown number. I didn't pick up. I didn't want to. I stared at it as it rang, wondering if this was the moment they'd try to undo what had been done. Maybe it was one of the vendors confused about the canceled payments. Maybe it was the planner again. Maybe, just maybe, it was my son. I let it ring out. 30 minutes later, another call came, this time from a relative, my cousin Lisa, the same cousin who had attended the wedding, who had smiled for the group photos while I was walking alone to my car. I answered out of instinct, not interest. "Christine," she said, her voice tense. "Yes," I replied coldly. "What happened?" That question. What happened? I wanted to laugh, but the laughter wouldn't come. Instead, I answered calmly, "I was asked to leave, so I left." She paused, clearly thrown off by the bluntness. "They're saying you caused a scene, that you left angry and started canceling payments to sabotage the wedding." I closed my eyes. The lie was already circulating like wildfire. I left silently, I replied, without a word. I didn't yell. I didn't confront anyone. I just walked away because I was told I wasn't welcome. And I canceled the payments because I am not a sponsor of an event that treated me like a stain. She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing. "You were really asked to leave?" "Yes." "By her?" "Yes." "And your son, he didn't stop it." That one broke me a little. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "No, he let it happen." The silence that followed was heavy. And then she whispered, "Christine, I'm so sorry. We didn't know. No one told us." I didn't care who knew. Not anymore. But I appreciated that she sounded human. That's someone anyone outside of that cold bubble they created could still feel empathy. After that, more calls came. One from my brother, who had heard a twisted version of events from someone at the wedding. One from a mutual friend who had seen my name trending in a local Facebook thread, where people were speculating about the mother of the groom who disappeared. Each call was laced with curiosity, concern, and disbelief. But the one call I wanted most didn't come. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the day after. 3 days went by, and nothing. Until finally on the 4th day I saw his name flash on my screen. My son. I stared at it for a long time. My finger hovered over the answer button, then pulled away, then hovered again. My heart raced. When I finally picked up, I didn't say anything first. "Mom," he said. His voice was flat, careful, not sad, not remorseful, just cautious, like someone walking on a frozen lake, afraid of the ice cracking under their feet. I heard what happened. He said, "Did you?" I replied, my voice low. "I didn't know she was going to ask you to leave." I swear I didn't know. I stayed quiet. She said you were making things stressful, that you were upsetting her, that you were making the day about yourself. There was again that old knife, twisted deeper each time. I offered to fix a bracelet. I said, I brought mints. I stayed silent, and I left when I was told I wasn't wanted. He didn't deny it. He didn't argue, and that was the most painful part. He wasn't calling to apologize. He was calling to explain, to justify, to do damage control. The payments, he added after a pause. Some of the vendors are saying they haven't been paid. The planner said you backed out. What happened? I couldn't believe it, even now. After all of it, that was his concern. The money. You let them discard me like a burden, I said, voice trembling. I sat in a hotel room while you said, your vows. You're asking me about money. He sighed. I'm not saying it was right, but it was my wedding. Mom, I didn't want drama. Then you should have paid for it yourself. Silence. I could feel the weight of that sentence settle between us like a wall, one he couldn't climb over. You know what hurts the most? I whispered. It's not the money. It's not even being kicked out. It's the fact that I spent my entire life showing up for you. I raised you alone. I supported you through everything. I gave you every piece of myself. And when I needed you to speak up for me, you went quiet. Still, he didn't deny it. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. I'm sorry you feel that way, was all he said. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Just, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's when I knew this wasn't going to end with a warm hug or a tearful reunion. This wasn't the part in the story where everything gets fixed. No, this was the part where I chose myself. Goodbye, I said quietly. Take care of your wife. You made your choice, and I ended the call. I sat in the silence again, but this time, I didn't feel hollow. I felt strong. I had faced the truth head on, and I had walked through it. Yes, the calls had started coming in, but so had something else. Clarity. Unfriended, uninvited, unapologetic. In the days that followed my silent exit and the storm of calls that came after, something shifted in me. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been. No, this wasn't the fury of a wounded mother anymore. This was something colder, heavier. It was the quiet realization that a door had been closed, not slammed shut, not locked violently, but slowly, quietly, with a click you don't notice until it's too late. And once I heard that click, I started seeing the truth more clearly than ever before. I opened Facebook one morning to a notification. You have been removed from the group. Family wedding countdown. It stung at first. That little red badge, once filled with cheerful upgrades about flower arrangements and seating charts, was gone. Not archived, not closed. I had been removed. I checked my friends list. My son's new wife unfriended. Her mother blocked. 2 of her bridesmaids who used to tag me in posts thanking me for supporting the big day, gone. It was like I had been erased with a single stroke, like they were trying to rewrite the memory of me being part of that wedding at all, as if my presence had never existed, as if my name had never been on the checkbook or on the RSVP list or whispered in the silence of the rehearsal dinner. I scrolled through their profiles on my alternate account. I wish I hadn't, but I did. There they were, smiling in photos, the wedding album, now posted publicly. Picture after picture of the happy couple, the guests, the bridesmaids in soft lavender, the groomsmen in matching suits. And there, in the middle of them, my son, my baby boy, laughing, toasting, kissing his bride. And I wasn't in a single frame, not in the background, not in the crowd, not even a blurry image from the rehearsal dinner. They had carefully, surgically edited me out. I was the ghost in a celebration I had helped pay for. A missing piece no one seemed to notice was gone. I didn't cry, not this time. I sat still, staring at the screen, and whispered out loud, so this is what I am now, a transaction, a memory to be deleted when inconvenient. That night, I got one final call from an old friend who had attended the wedding. She didn't try to defend anyone. She didn't even ask me what had happened. She just said, Christine, I don't know if you've seen the posts, but I wanted you to know I saw what happened. I saw you leave, and I saw him not go after you. I closed my eyes. I've never seen you look so alone, she added. I didn't respond. I didn't have the strength, but her words stuck with me, because that's exactly how I had felt. not just alone, abandoned. And the worst part, there was no apology coming. Not from my son, not from his wife, not from the people who stood beside them and said nothing. They weren't sorry, not even a little. They believed they were justified. They believed I was too much, that I was making it about myself, that I was ruining the vibe. But none of them had stopped to ask how it felt to be replaced. To be demoted from mother to nuisance, to be told, without words, "Thank you for your money. Now please disappear." No one came knocking on my door. No one sent flowers. No one said, "I'm sorry we hurt you." And that was when I made a decision, a quiet one, not rooted in anger but in finality. I deleted the wedding calendar from my phone. I removed the automated anniversary reminder. I packed away the receipts, the guest list drafts, the custom jewelry I had bought to match the bride's color scheme, and I put it all in a showbox, one I would never open again. I stopped calling. I stopped hoping. And most importantly, I stopped explaining myself. Because people who love you don't need explanations to treat you like you matter. I started building my life again, piece by piece, one boundary at a time. I focused on old friends who still remembered my birthday, on neighbors who asked how I was doing and actually listened to the answer, on quiet mornings with coffee that didn't begin with a call to fix someone else's crisis. And slowly, beautifully, I began to feel whole again. Not because anything was fixed, not because they apologized, but because I stopped needing them to. Sometimes the most powerful healing comes not from an apology, but from letting go of the apology you'll never receive. And that's what I did. I let it all go. The unfriending, the uninviting, the unapologetic silence. I gave it back to them like a gift I no longer needed. They can keep their version of the story. I'll keep my dignity. Asterisk healing isn't loud. It's quiet, and it's mine. The days turned to weeks. The pain didn't vanish, it simply changed shape. It stopped being a sharp, screaming wound and became something quieter, like an old scar that ached when the weather shifted. The betrayal was still there, lying under my skin like a buried splinter. But something else had started to bloom in its place. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It was something even more necessary, healing. But healing doesn't come the way movies tell us it will. It doesn't show up with grand epiphanies or sobbing, phone calls in the rain. It doesn't come wrapped in apologies or endings tied with a neat little bow. No. Healing is quiet. Healing is sitting alone in your living room with a cup of tea, realizing you didn't cry that day. It's walking past a photo of your child and not feeling like the air's been knocked out of your chest. It's breathing in a moment of peace and realizing that moment is yours. You made it. You chose it. I didn't wait for him to call again. I didn't wait for anyone to make things right. Instead, I started choosing myself in ways I never had before. I started waking up early just to sit by the window and watch the sun rise. I began walking every morning, no music, no noise, just the sound of birds and my own heartbeat. It reminded me that I was still here, still alive, still capable of joy, even after being so thoroughly broken. I redecorated the guest room that had once held boxes of wedding supplies. I cleared it out completely, painted the walls a pale green, added soft lighting, hung my favorite painting. It became my sanctuary, a place that wasn't touched by their indifference, a place that reminded me that I had worth beyond what anyone else chose to see. One day, I walked into a boutique I used to avoid. It was always too expensive, too elegant. I used to think, maybe one day, when I have a reason to treat myself. That day, I didn't wait for a reason. I bought a dress, not for a wedding, not for a dinner party, not for anyone else's approval. Just for me. The woman at the counter said, "This color looks amazing on you," and I smiled, because for the first time in months, I believed her. Healing is that moment when the sting of the past becomes just that, the past. It's no longer the centerpiece of your every conversation. It stops living at the tip of your tongue. You stop rehearsing your pain for the world, begging them to understand what they didn't witness. I stopped explaining myself to anyone who didn't already care. I stopped expecting closure from people who were never capable of offering it. I stopped replaying the wedding in my head, the chair I never sat in, the toast I never made, the dance I never had. Those things were stolen, yes, but they were not my whole story. They were only a chapter, and I get to write the rest. Some friends fell away after the wedding. Some stayed silent, unsure how to navigate the awkwardness. That hurt too, but it made room for new voices, for genuine people who didn't ask me to shrink so others could shine. I started journaling again, writing my thoughts out every night like confessions to myself. I didn't filter anything. The anger, the shame, the disappointment, all of it poured onto the page until it felt a little lighter, a little less suffocating, and slowly, I began writing about hope, about the things I wanted again, the woman I was becoming, not the mother defined only by sacrifice, but the woman who remembered her own dreams. I joined a local book club, the first time I walked into that little coffee shop with strangers. I was nervous, worried they'd sense my brokenness, or worse, pity me, but they didn't. They welcomed me, listened when I spoke, laughed at my jokes. They saw me as me, not a mother, discarded, not a woman scorned, just Christine. One afternoon, during a group discussion, someone asked, "What's something you've done this year that made you feel powerful?" I hesitated. Then I said, I walked away from something that was destroying me quietly, and I didn't beg to be loved. There was a long pause, and then they clapped. It was soft. A real dot. It was the first time I had been really seen since the wedding. And I realized I didn't need to be anyone's mother in that moment. I didn't need to be included in someone else's fairy tale to know that my story still mattered. Healing isn't a rescue dot, it's a rebirth dot. It's not loud, it doesn't need to be dot. It's in the way you get up in the morning, even when the grief still whispers your name. It's in the way you stop chasing closure and start building something new with your own two hands. Dot. It's in the way you look in the mirror one day and smile, not because everything is okay, but because you are, and no one can take that from you again.